There's a place on Earth where one wrong move can make your fuel bill explode, send food prices higher, shake stock markets, terrify governments, and make insurance companies suddenly discover religion. And no, it is not Wall Street. It is a narrow strip of water between Iran and Oman called the Strait of Hormuz. But through that tiny corridor moves roughly 20 million barrels of oil every single day. So when Iran threatens to turn this passage into a geopolitical pressure cooker, the whole world pays attention. But here's the twist. The trap Iran set for the world economy may have started snapping back on Iran itself. Because when you threaten the artery that keeps the global energy system alive, you scare everyone. And suddenly, the whole world starts looking for ways to make sure you can never hold that much power again. Imagine the global economy as a giant machine. Oil is not the only fuel that keeps it running, but it is still one of the main ones. Cars, trucks, factories, ships, planes, fertilizers, plastics, electricity, military logistics, all of it is connected to energy. Now imagine that one of the most important pipes feeding that machine runs through one narrow corridor. That is Hormuz. On one side, Iran. On the other, Oman and the Arabian Peninsula. Behind it, the Persian Gulf, home to some of the world's biggest oil and gas producers, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, Bahrain, and Iran itself. In front of it, the open ocean. That means if oil wants to leave the Persian Gulf and reach Asia, Europe, or global markets, much of it has to pass through here. And it is not only oil. The strait also carries huge volumes of liquefied natural gas, especially from Qatar and the UAE. So it is not just gasoline prices that feel it. Electricity prices can feel it, fertilizer prices can feel it, food prices can feel it. Basically, your grocery receipt can end up becoming a geopolitical casualty, which is unfair because tomatoes did not ask to be involved in Middle Eastern naval strategy. For Iran, the Strait of Hormuz has always been more than geography. It is leverage. Iran knows that it cannot match the United States militarily ship for ship, aircraft for aircraft, or dollar for dollar. But it does not need to because Iran sits next to one of the most sensitive choke points on the planet. That means Tehran can threaten the global economy without needing to conquer anything. It can simply create enough fear that ship owners, insurers, and oil traders start panicking on their own. That is the real power of Hormuz. Iran does not always have to physically close the strait. Sometimes it only has to make people believe the strait is becoming too dangerous to use. When risk rises, insurance costs rise. When insurance costs rise, shipping costs rise. When shipping costs rise, oil prices rise. And when oil prices rise, politicians start receiving very angry phone calls from people who just wanted to fill their cars without taking out a mortgage. This is why Iran has used tanker seizures and maritime threats as a pressure tactic again and again. In 2019, 2 oil tankers were attacked near the Strait of Hormuz. Later that same year, Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized the British tanker Stena Impero. In 2023, Iran seized the Advantage Suite and the Niobe. In April 2024, Iran seized the MSC Ares. And each time, the message was basically the same. If Iran is squeezed, the region will not stay calm. That was the oil trap. Make the world feel that punishing Iran could mean punishing itself. When Iran turns Hormuz into a threat, it gives the world a reason to do something they might otherwise avoid, which is to reduce dependence on Hormuz. And once that process starts, Iran's leverage starts shrinking. Think of it like this. If you are the only bridge into a city, you have power. But if you keep threatening to blow up the bridge, eventually everyone starts building tunnels, ferries, bypass roads, helicopter pads, anything to make sure they never have to depend on you again. Congratulations, you scared them into innovation. Every crisis encourages governments to expand pipeline alternatives, diversify energy supplies, build strategic reserves, strengthen naval escorts, and look for non-Iranian routes. Saudi Arabia has pipeline capacity toward the Red Sea. The UAE has a pipeline to Fujairah, outside the strait. These alternatives cannot fully replace Hormuz, but they matter. And every time Iran threatens the strait, the argument for investing in alternatives gets stronger. That is the backfire. Iran uses Hormuz because it wants to show the world it is powerful. But by using it too aggressively, it teaches the world that Iran's power must be bypassed. Now, the most underrated part of this story is the insurance. During major Hormuz disruptions, war risk insurance premiums can skyrocket. And when insurance becomes too expensive, many tankers simply stay away. So Iran does not even need to block every ship physically. The market can block itself. The fear becomes the blockade. Everyone pays more, and politicians start pretending they always had a very detailed plan for this exact situation. One of the biggest misconceptions about Hormuz is that it is mainly a Western problem. It is not. The biggest customers for oil moving through Hormuz are in Asia, China, India, Japan, South Korea. According to the IEA, around 80% of the oil flowing through Hormuz is headed toward Asian markets. So when Iran threatens the strait, it is not only Washington or Brussels that gets nervous. Beijing gets nervous. New Delhi gets nervous. Tokyo gets nervous. Seoul gets nervous. Iran often presents itself as standing against the West, but Hormuz disruptions do not stop at Western borders. They hit Asian economies hard too. China is one of Iran's most important economic lifelines. India is a huge energy importer. Japan and South Korea depend heavily on secure maritime energy flows. If Iran pushes too far, it risks angering countries that are not exactly eager to become unpaid extras in Tehran's confrontation with Washington. When you weaponize a global choke point, you do not get to choose who suffers. The pain spreads everywhere, and some of the countries feeling that pain are countries Iran would rather keep on its side, or at least not push into the arms of a US-led maritime security response. Now let's talk about what everyone actually feels: the prices. When Hormuz heats up, oil markets react fast. Even rumors can move prices. Actual attacks, seizures, or threats can send them jumping. This is because traders are not only pricing what happened today, they are pricing what could happen tomorrow. Could Saudi or UAE exports be disrupted? Could the US military get involved? Could Iran retaliate? Could this turn into a wider regional war? Markets hate uncertainty, and once oil prices rise, the effect moves through the economy. Fuel gets more expensive, airlines pay more, shipping companies pay more, factories face higher input costs, and even food production gets more expensive because fertilizers and transport depend on energy. And then the average person, who has never once thought about the Strait of Hormuz, suddenly wonders why everything costs more. That is how a crisis in a narrow waterway ends up inside your monthly budget. Geopolitics does not stay on the map, it shows up in your daily life. Of course, once the Strait of Hormuz becomes unstable, military powers do not just sit back and say, "Interesting." The United States has long treated freedom of navigation in the Gulf as a core strategic interest. That means when Iran seizes or threatens ships, U.S. naval forces often increase patrols, escort vessels, monitor Iranian movements, and sometimes intervene directly. Every Iranian move around Hormuz tends to invite more Western military attention. Iran wants to show it controls the neighborhood, but aggressive actions often bring more U.S. ships, drones, surveillance aircraft, and allied coordination into that neighborhood. In other words, Iran tries to push foreign powers out and somehow ends up giving them a stronger reason to stay. Then comes the legal side. International shipping relies on the principle of freedom of navigation. The Strait of Hormuz is especially sensitive because it is used for international transit. Iran argues that it has sovereignty concerns, security concerns, and the right to enforce laws in its waters. Western governments argue that Iran uses those claims as cover for coercion, hostage diplomacy, or maritime intimidation. International bodies have repeatedly warned against attacks, seizures, and threats to commercial shipping. The legal debate matters because legitimacy matters. Iran does not want to look like a reckless disruptor. It wants to look like a state defending its sovereignty. The US does not want to look like it is militarizing the Gulf for fun. It wants to look like it is defending global commerce. So the fight is not only over ships, it is also over the story. Who is the protector? Who is the pirate? Who is enforcing law? And who is breaking it? Now, whenever Hormuz comes up, people ask the dramatic question, could Iran close the strait? Technically, Iran could try, but closing Hormuz is not as simple as flipping a switch. It would invite a massive military response, hurt Iran's own exports, anger major Asian customers, damage Gulf states, and definitely isolate Tehran diplomatically. That is why Iran usually prefers ambiguity. Walk close enough to the cliff that everyone gets scared, but not so far that you fall off with them. The danger is that it only works until someone miscalculates. That is how a controlled crisis becomes an uncontrolled one. The bigger story here is the fragility of globalization. The modern economy was built on the assumption that goods, energy, and money can move smoothly across the planet. But choke points like Hormuz expose how fragile that system really is. This is why Hormuz matters so much. It shows that geopolitics is not separate from economics. War risk becomes insurance risk. Insurance risk becomes shipping risk. Shipping risk becomes inflation risk. And inflation risk becomes political risk. All from one narrow passage most people could not find on a map 5 minutes ago. That is the insane part. So did Iran's oil trap work? In the short term, yes, partially. Iran proved it can scare markets, disrupt shipping, it proved the world cannot ignore it. But in the long term, the strategy is dangerous because it gives the rest of the world another reason to reduce that leverage. That does not mean Hormuz becomes irrelevant. Far from it. Hormuz will remain one of the most important choke points on Earth, but Iran's mistake is believing that fear always creates power. Sometimes fear creates adaptation, and adaptation is exactly what weakens the trap. So the Strait of Hormuz is burning because it reveals one of the biggest truths in geopolitics. The country that controls the choke point has power, but the country that overuses that power teaches everyone else how to live without it. Iran tried to turn Hormuz into an oil trap for the world economy, but the more it weaponizes the strait, the more the world looks for ways to bypass, contain, and neutralize that weapon. Drop your thoughts on Iran's Hormuz gamble down in the comments below. Do you think Iran still holds the ultimate oil card, or has it pushed the world too far? And if you want to dive deeper into the insane world of geopolitics, global power struggles, and the quiet moves shaping your everyday life, make sure to subscribe to Affluent Aces. Until next time then.